Here's something wild. In 1492, Christopher Columbus lands in the Caribbean, thinking he's found a shortcut to Asia. He's wrong, but that mistake kicks off the most transformative century in human history. Within 50 years, Spain goes from being a mid-tier European kingdom to controlling the first truly global empire. They've got colonies in the Americas, the Philippines, parts of Africa, and trading posts around the world. At one point, the Spanish Empire covers almost 5 million square miles. And here's the phrase everyone knows: the empire on which the sun never set. Because somewhere in Spanish territory, it was always daytime Spain brought Europe, the Americas, Africa, and Asia together for the first time in history. They created global trade routes. They spread languages, religions, and technologies. They also conquered indigenous peoples, extracted massive wealth, and caused devastating destruction. The Spanish Empire is one of the most consequential empires in history, for better and for worse. So how did they build it? How did they maintain it for over 300 years? And what finally brought it down? I'm Jack, this is Blueprints of Power, and today we're diving into the empire that made the modern world. Let's go.
Schemes in the shadows, plans in the light, kings and conquerors chasing the night. Brick by brick, their stories grow tall, but every empire learns how to fall.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Blueprints of Power. I'm Jack.
I'm Lily.
And I'm Charlie.
Today we're covering the Spanish Empire, and I'll be honest, this one's complex emotionally.
Why is that?
Because the Spanish Empire represents both incredible human achievement and terrible human cost. Spain financed exploration that connected the world. They built universities, cities, and churches across the Americas. But they also conquered and oppressed indigenous peoples, extracted resources brutally, and caused the deaths of millions through disease, warfare, and forced labor.
So we're not going to sugarcoat this. We're going to talk honestly about both the innovations and the atrocities. Because understanding the Spanish Empire means understanding how the modern world was shaped, the good and the bad.
That's fair. So when are we talking about?
The Spanish Empire really takes off in 1492 with Columbus's voyage and lasts until the early 1800s when most of their American colonies gain independence. We're covering about 350 years.
And at its peak in the late 1700s, Spain controlled modern-day Mexico, most of Central and South America except Brazil, parts of the Caribbean, Florida, the southwestern United States, the Philippines, and territories in Africa and Italy.
That's enormous.
It's the first empire where the sun literally never set. At any given moment, it was daytime somewhere in Spanish territory.
And Spain's influence is still everywhere. Spanish is the second most spoken language in the world by native speakers. Catholic Christianity is the dominant religion in Latin America. Spanish colonial architecture, food, and culture are foundational to dozens of countries.
So even though the empire ended, the impact didn't.
Not even close. Spanish colonization shaped the modern Americas more than anything else.
All right, so let's start at the beginning. Lily, how does Spain become an empire?
Okay, so for most of the Middle Ages, there's no unified Spain. The Iberian Peninsula, modern-day Spain and Portugal, is divided between Christian kingdoms in the north and Muslim kingdoms in the south, which had been there since the 700s.
So Christians and Muslims are both on the peninsula.
Yes, for about 700 years. The Christian kingdoms slowly pushed south in what's called the Reconquista, the reconquest. And by the 1400s, there are a few main Christian kingdoms: Castile, Aragon, Navarre, and Portugal.
So Spain doesn't exist yet.
Not as a unified country, but in 1469, something crucial happens. Isabella, Princess of Castile, marries Ferdinand, Prince of Aragon. When they become queen and king of their respective kingdoms, they essentially unite Spain.
So it's a marriage alliance.
A strategic marriage that creates the foundation for Spain. And Isabella and Ferdinand, known as the Catholic monarchs, are ambitious. In 1492, they conquer Granada, the last Muslim kingdom on the peninsula, completing the Reconquista.
So 1492 is a big year.
Huge year. Because that same year, they agree to finance an Italian navigator named Christopher Columbus who wants to sail west to reach Asia.
Columbus.
Yes, Columbus believes the world is smaller than it is and thinks he can reach the riches of India and China by sailing west across the Atlantic. He's wrong about the size, but he's right that there's something there.
He finds the Americas.
He lands in the Caribbean, probably the Bahamas, and thinks he's reached islands off the coast of Asia. That's why he calls the indigenous people Indians. He has no idea he's found two entire continents unknown to Europe.
That's such a massive mistake to make.
A world-changing mistake. Columbus makes 4 voyages between 1492 and 1504, exploring the Caribbean and parts of Central and South America, and he claims everything for Spain.
So Spain suddenly has access to the Americas.
Yes, and other explorers follow. In 1513, Vasco Núñez de Balboa crosses Panama and sees the Pacific Ocean, proving this is a new landmass, not Asia. In 1519, Ferdinand Magellan, funded by Spain, attempts to sail around the world. He dies in the Philippines, but his crew completes the journey in 1522, proving the Earth is round and much bigger than Columbus thought.
So Spain is funding all this exploration.
They are. And while exploration is happening, conquest is too. In 1519, Hernán Cortés lands in Mexico and conquers the Aztec Empire by 1521. We covered that in our Aztec episode.
Right, disease and indigenous allies helped him.
Exactly. And in 1532, Francisco Pizarro lands in South America and conquers the Inca Empire in Peru. Again, disease, superior weapons, and internal divisions helped the Spanish.
So within 40 years, Spain conquers 2 massive empires.
2 of the most sophisticated civilizations in the Americas. And they start extracting wealth, especially silver. In 1545, they discover the Silver Mountain at Potosí in modern-day Bolivia. It's one of the richest silver deposits in history.
So Spain hits the jackpot.
Literally. For the next 200 years, silver from Potosí and other mines in Mexico flows into Spain, and it makes Spain the wealthiest and most powerful kingdom in Europe.
So they're getting rich quick.
Incredibly rich, and Spain uses that wealth to build an empire. By the mid-1500s, under King Charles I, who's also Holy Roman Emperor Charles V, Spain controls vast territories in Europe and the Americas.
So Spain's a superpower now.
The superpower. And under Charles's son, Philip II, who rules from 1556 to 1598, Spain reaches its peak. Philip adds the Philippines, named after him, to the empire. He defeats the Ottoman navy at the Battle of Lepanto in 1571. He's ruling over the largest empire the world has ever seen at that point.
So Spain's on top of the world.
They are. But maintaining all this is complicated and expensive. And that's where Spain's real challenge begins.
All right, quick pause. If you're loving this deep dive into the Spanish Empire, and honestly, this is one of the most important empires we've covered, hit that follow button, subscribe to Blueprints of Power on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're listening. We're covering the empires that shape the world we live in today. And after the Spanish Empire, we've got the Inca Empire, the Qing Dynasty, the Mali Empire. So many incredible stories coming your way. Share this episode with someone who'd appreciate it. Send it to a friend who loves history, a teacher who might play it in class, a family member who's always curious. Post it on social media. Help us grow this community. And please leave us a review. It makes a huge difference in helping new listeners find the show. Tell us what you're learning, what you think, what empires you want us to cover next. All right, back to Spain, because we're about to get into how they ran the first global empire and what that meant for the people they ruled. Let's go.
Okay, so Spain has this massive empire across multiple continents. How do they actually run it?
Great question. Running a global empire in the 1500s and 1600s is incredibly difficult. Communication is slow. It can take 6 months for a message to travel from Spain to Peru, so Spain has to create systems that work at distance.
That sounds impossible.
It's challenging, but they develop a recipe. Let me break it down. Ingredient number 1, the viceroyalty system. Spain divides their American territories into large administrative units called viceroyalties, each ruled by a viceroy, a representative of the king.
So it's like the Persian satrapy system.
Very similar. Initially, there are 2 viceroyalties, New Spain, which covers Mexico and Central America, and Peru, which covers most of South America. Later, they add more.
So the viceroys have a lot of power?
Significant power, yes. But like the Persians, Spain uses checks and balances. They send inspectors from Spain to audit the viceroys. And viceroys know that if they're corrupt or incompetent, they'll be recalled and possibly prosecuted.
So there's oversight.
Attempted oversight, it doesn't always work. Some viceroys get away with corruption, but the system exists.
What about the people already living there?
That's ingredient number 2, the encomienda system, and this is where things get dark. The encomienda system grants Spanish colonists control over indigenous communities. In theory, the colonist is supposed to protect the indigenous people and convert them to Christianity. In exchange, the indigenous people provide labor.
That sounds like slavery with extra steps.
It effectively is. The colonists exploit indigenous people brutally, forcing them to work in mines, fields, and construction with little or no pay, terrible conditions, and high death rates.
That's horrible.
It's one of the darkest aspects of Spanish colonization. Some Spanish priests, like Bartolomé de las Casas, speak out against it, arguing that indigenous people have rights and souls, but economic interests usually win out.
So there's resistance within Spain itself?
Some, yes. The Spanish crown passes laws like the new laws of 1542 trying to protect indigenous people, but they're poorly enforced because colonists resist them and they're thousands of miles away.
So the system continues.
It continues in various forms. And ingredient 3, the casta system, a racial hierarchy. Spanish colonial society is divided into categories based on ancestry. At the top are peninsulares, people born in Spain, then criollos, people of Spanish descent born in the Americas, then mestizos, mixed Spanish and indigenous, then indigenous people, then enslaved Africans at the bottom.
So your birth determines your status.
Completely. And this creates rigid social inequality that lasts for centuries and still affects Latin American societies today.
That's a long-lasting impact.
Very long-lasting. Ingredient 4, the Catholic Church. Spain sees colonization as not just economic but religious. They're converting people to Christianity. They build churches, cathedrals, and missions everywhere.
So religion is a big part of the empire.
Huge part. Priests and missionaries accompany conquistadors. They establish schools and universities. The University of Santo Domingo in 1538 and the University of Mexico in 1551 are some of the oldest universities in the Americas.
So they're building educational institutions.
They are. But they're also destroying indigenous religions and culture. Temples are torn down, sacred texts are burned, indigenous spiritual practices are banned. It's cultural destruction.
So it's complicated, building some things while destroying others.
Exactly. Ingredient 5, economic extraction. The Spanish Empire's economy is based on extracting resources from the colonies, primarily silver and gold, and shipping them to Spain.
How much silver are we talking about?
Enormous amounts. Between 1500 and 1800, about 150,000 tons of silver flow from the Americas to Spain. That's one of the largest transfers of wealth in history.
Where does it all go?
Some funds building projects in Spain, magnificent churches, palaces, and monasteries. Some funds wars in Europe. But a lot of it flows through Spain to other European countries because Spain is constantly importing goods and fighting expensive wars.
So they're rich but spending it all?
Basically, and ingredient 6, the Manila Galleons, the first global trade route. Starting in 1565, Spain establishes a regular shipping route from Acapulco, Mexico to Manila in the Philippines and back.
So they're connecting America and Asia.
Yes, silver from the Americas goes to the Philippines, where it's traded for silk, spices, and porcelain from China. Then those Asian goods come back to Mexico and are shipped to Spain or sold in the Americas.
That's the first global supply chain.
It really is. Spanish galleons are connecting 4 continents: Europe, America, Asia, and Africa, for the first time in history.
That's incredible.
It transforms the world economy. And ingredient 7, cultural blending. Despite all the oppression, cultures mix. Spanish, indigenous, and African cultures blend to create new languages, foods, music, and traditions.
Like what?
The Spanish language absorbs indigenous words: chocolate, tomato, avocado. Mexican food is a blend of indigenous corn, beans, chilies with Spanish rice, pork, and cheese. Music styles like salsa and reggaeton have African, indigenous, and Spanish influences.
So something new emerges.
Yes, Latin American culture is syncretic, a blend of multiple traditions, and that cultural richness is one of the lasting positive legacies.
So Spain creates something new, even if the process was brutal.
That's an accurate way to put it. And for about 200 years, from the mid-1500s to the mid-1700s, Spain is the dominant global power. They control the seas, they control the silver, they control vast territories.
So what changes?
Here comes the fall.
Before we get into the fall of the Spanish Empire, I want to acknowledge that this episode covers difficult topics: conquest, oppression, and exploitation. These are painful parts of history, but they're important to understand because they shaped the world we live in today. If you're finding value in blueprints of power, please share it with someone who'd appreciate it. Understanding history, the good and the bad, helps us make better decisions in the present. Next week, we're covering the Inca Empire, the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. They built roads, cities, and agricultural systems high in the Andes Mountains that still amaze engineers today. It's going to be fascinating. And please leave us a review if you haven't already. It genuinely helps us reach more listeners, and we appreciate every single one. All right, time to talk about how the Spanish Empire, after centuries of dominance, eventually fell apart. Let's get into it.
Okay, so Spain's been dominant for 200 years. What causes the decline?
The decline starts in the 1600s and accelerates in the 1700s and 1800s. First major problem: economic mismanagement. All that silver flowing into Spain causes massive inflation. Prices in Spain skyrocket because there's so much money but not enough goods.
So they're literally too rich?
In a way, they have money, but they're not producing things. Spain imports manufactured goods from other European countries: France, England, the Netherlands. So the silver flows through Spain to other countries, who get wealthier while Spain doesn't develop industry.
So Spain becomes dependent on colonies but doesn't build its own economy.
Exactly. It's called the resource curse. Having easy access to wealth from colonies discourages Spain from developing manufacturing or innovation.
That's ironic.
Very ironic. And second problem: constant warfare. Spain is fighting wars continuously against England, against France, against the Netherlands, against the Ottoman Empire. And wars are incredibly expensive.
Why are they fighting so much?
Spain is trying to maintain its dominance and defend Catholicism during the Protestant Reformation. But these wars drain the treasury. Spain declares bankruptcy multiple times: in 1557, 1560, 1575, 1596, 1607, and 1627.
Wait, you can declare bankruptcy multiple times?
Apparently, but it devastates Spain's credit and economy. And third problem: military defeats. In 1588, Spain sends the Spanish Armada, a huge fleet, to invade England. It's defeated by the smaller English navy and storms. It's a massive blow to Spanish prestige.
So Spain's not invincible anymore.
Right. And in the early 1600s, the Netherlands, which was part of the Spanish Empire, wins independence after an 80-year war. Spain loses one of its wealthiest territories.
So pieces are breaking off.
Yes, And fourth problem, dynastic decline. The Spanish royal family, the Habsburgs, intermarry for generations to keep power in the family, but this causes genetic problems. The last Habsburg king of Spain, Charles II, who dies in 1700, has severe health issues from inbreeding.
That's grim.
It is, and his death triggers the War of Spanish Succession, a massive European war over who should rule Spain. Eventually, the Bourbon family, related to French kings, takes over, but Spain is weakened.
So they're fighting wars over the throne.
Constantly. And fifth problem, Enlightenment ideas. In the 1700s, Enlightenment philosophy spreads ideas about natural rights, democracy, and self-governance. These ideas reach the Americas.
So colonists start wanting independence.
Exactly. The Criollos, Spanish descendants born in the Americas, resent being treated as inferior to Peninsulares born in Spain. They're wealthy and educated, but excluded from top government positions.
So they're ready to rebel.
They are. And the trigger comes in 1808 when Napoleon Bonaparte invades Spain and puts his brother on the Spanish throne. The colonies see this as illegitimate.
So Spain's own crisis creates opportunity for the colonies.
Exactly. Between 1810 and 1825, most of Spanish America gains independence. Leaders like Simón Bolívar in South America and Miguel Hidalgo in Mexico lead independence movements.
So the empire just falls apart?
Rapidly. By 1825, Spain only controls Cuba, Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and a few small territories. And in 1898, Spain fights the Spanish-American War against the United States and loses. Quickly, Cuba gains independence, and the U.S. takes Puerto Rico, the Philippines, and Guam.
So by 1898, the empire's basically gone.
Gone. Spain's no longer a major power. They had ruled the first global empire for over 300 years, but by the early 1900s, it's over.
What's the legacy?
The legacy is enormous and complicated. Spanish is spoken by almost 500 million people. Catholic Christianity is the dominant religion in Latin America. Spanish colonial cities, architecture, and legal systems shaped development across the Americas.
But there's also the painful legacy.
Absolutely. The conquest devastated indigenous populations through disease, warfare, and forced labor. Estimated death tolls range from 50 to 90 million indigenous people in the Americas in the century after contact. It's one of the greatest demographic catastrophes in history.
That's almost unimaginable.
It is. And the racial hierarchies and economic inequality created by Spanish colonialism still affect Latin American societies today. So the Spanish Empire's legacy is a mix: cultural richness and terrible cost.
All right, we've covered the rise, the reign, and the fall of the Spanish Empire. This one's heavy, but there are important lessons. Charlie, what's yours?
This one's tough, but here it is. Easy money corrupts. Spain had massive wealth flowing in from silver mines, but because it came easy, they didn't develop their own economy or industry. They just imported everything and fought wars. The lesson? Sustainable success comes from building, creating, and producing, not just extracting. Whether it's empires, companies, or individuals, you can't just rely on easy resources. You have to create value.
Build, don't just extract.
Exactly.
That's really good. Mine's about the danger of systems built on oppression. Spain created the encomienda and casta systems that treated people as unequal based on race and birth, and those systems created instability and resentment that eventually contributed to independence movements. The lesson? Systems built on inequality and exploitation are unstable. They may work short-term, but they create pressures that eventually tear them apart. If you want something lasting, you need justice, not just power.
Inequality creates instability.
Always.
Both excellent. Mine's about unintended consequences. Spain connected the world, and that changed everything. They spread languages, religions, crops, and technologies, but they also spread diseases, violence, and oppression. The lesson? Actions have ripple effects you can't fully predict. When you connect systems or create change, you're not just doing what you intend. You're unleashing forces that will play out in ways you can't control. So think carefully about the systems you create and the changes you make, because the consequences will outlast you.
Every action echoes forward.
Exactly.
That's profound.
This episode was intense.
It really was. The Spanish Empire is essential to understanding the modern world, the good and the bad.
Both need to be acknowledged.
Absolutely. All right. Next week, we're covering the Inca Empire, the largest empire in pre-Columbian America. They built roads connecting mountains, deserts, and jungles. They created agricultural terraces that still work today. They had no written language but used knotted strings called quipus to record information. It's an incredible story of innovation cut short by Spanish conquest.
I'm ready for that. The Incas sound amazing.
They really were. It's going to be a great episode.
Can't wait. All right, that's it for today. Thanks for hanging with us through a complex and difficult topic on Blueprints of Power.
I'm Lily.
I'm Charlie.
And I'm Jack, and we'll see you next time. Peace out.